On unfulfilled weekly promises by Education Cabinet Secretary, the government has finally released school capitation funds 4 weeks after schools opened for Term 2. The government dispatched on the breakdown of the funds shows that the 24 billion shillings released by the National Treasury, 15.6 billion shillings, will be disbursed to secondary schools, 4.6 billion shillings to primary and 3.8 billion shillings to junior secondary. Now, the funds are, however, 4 billion shillings less than the Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu's figure of 28 billion shillings, which he had promised to disburse. Shadrach Miti with that story.
It has been 4 weeks of schools running on empty since the opening for new term. So dire was the situation that many secondary school principals were planning to close schools for lack of money, while others opted for food rationing and varying of the school diet. Faced with the danger of throwing schools into financial and administrative crisis, the government has released the much-awaited funds. A dispatch from the National Treasury on the breakdown of the disbursed funds indicate that 24 billion shillings meant for free day secondary education, free primary education and junior secondary has been disbursed. Accordingly, 15.6 billion shillings will be disbursed to secondary schools, 4.6 billion shillings to primary and 3.8 billion shillings to junior secondary. The money is, however, 4 billion short of expectation.
The capitation funds, which are to the tune of 28 billion, the Ministry of National Treasury was supposed to have given us the funds before Friday last week, but there was a delay.
The funding model that is being used for the last 2-3 years has been very punitive to schools in our view as Kesha. Because the funding is being done per quarter, 25% of funds released by the Exchequer to the Ministry of Education on FSDE. We are no longer looking at that collective figure of 22,244, and then talk of 50% in term 1, 30% in term 2 and 20% in term 3. We are no longer looking at it in that way. It is based on funds that are released.
In a recent interview with KTN News, Kenya Secondary Schools Heads Association Chairperson Kahi Indemoli explained the impact of funds delays.
We've been funded less of what we expected to get by almost 2,000 per student for the last 2 years. So the government is in arrears. Yeah? But as we know, government does not fund backward.
Schools will be able to receive capitation funds. That is senior secondary schools, our junior secondary schools, plus our primary schools. We are sorry for the delay, but by the end of the week, the money should be in the accounts of those schools.
Already, Basic Education Principal Secretary Dr. Belio Kipsang has warned of struggles for free day secondary education in the next financial year due to a 22 billion shilling budget shortfall.
On free day secondary at senior secondary, Chair, we've been allocated in this financial 65.58 billion shillings. If we were to fund our children at the rate that we have told ourselves of 22,244, then we would need 88 billion shillings. Almost 1 million children are not included in the funding of free day secondary school as we go to the next financial year.
The immediate task for school principals will be to pay salaries for workers, including teachers employed by boards of management, who have not received their salaries from as far back as February. Shadrach Miti, KTN News.
All right, Kenya has inched closer to the realization